And welcome back to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in conjunction with our broadcast partners at Tri-X 57. I'm Joe Martucci. We have the whole crew with us today. Dan Skeldon, Palma Shiles is back. Palma was battling an illness for a while here. And Palma, I feel like every day someone's telling me that they have the flu or something, or laryngitis. And it seems like two things with whatever sickness is going around. One, people can't talk. And two, it's just hanging around for a while.
Yeah, it was really bad for me. Like that's probably the sickest I've been for such like a long period of time. I had the flu for like a week and then it turned into this respiratory thing that would not just go away on its own. So I ended up taking some medicine and it's still hanging around like a sinus thing, but whatever. I feel like a functioning human again, so
Well, that's
I'm
good. We're
happy.
glad you're a functioning human today. We really appreciate that. But we're glad that you're better and you're here back with us, and we'll have you for the rest of the year, of course. Dan, I think you've been staying healthy, right?
Yeah, the rest of my house has been sick. I knock on wood, somehow I've been avoiding the stomach bug that has circulated around our house and a pretty bad cold. So far, so good. Hope I'm not jinxing it.
All right. Only the strong survive, right, Dan?
So they say.
That's what they say. All right. Nothing about illness for today. We're going to talk about what we talk about best, and that is tidal flooding and coastal resiliency. And we are super excited to bring on Pedro Lomonaco. He is the director of the Hinsdale Wave Research Laboratory at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. He is an engineer by trade, and we came across his work on Instagram. I think it was Palma, if I remember correctly. I think she sent me this, I'm going to say it was viral, this viral post of these huge waves that you were generating and having them go into houses that were raised and not raised and seeing what the impacts were. And we said, we got to talk to this guy. And 3 months later, we're talking to him. So Pedro, welcome to the show. And thanks so much for being on here.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Excellent. No illnesses, right? Everything good on your end and in the family recently.
So far, so good, and I'm gonna knock on wood as well.
All right, good. Maybe it's the West Coast that's staying healthier here. All right, so why don't we start with this? Tell us about your interest in waves. So how did that start, and how did it mature to where it is now?
Well, actually, that started very early in my career. I was even working not even working, I was in high school. And we, as a family, we always went to the coast for vacation instead of inland. And immediately that was, you've been working and knowing about waves. In the middle of my civil engineering career, we started working on hydraulics and then the specialization on waves. And I realized, well, I get to work and be paid for the thing that I really love the most, which is the ocean and how the oceans are interacting with structures and how to design that. So that's how I started in a very, very early stage. And since then, it's been my career is 35 years working on coastal and ocean.
Got it. And you're from Spain, originally, and did you move right to Oregon from Spain, or did you kind of go? You did. You moved right to Oregon from Spain. Usually, I feel like people go, across the pond and then stop on the East Coast. You just said, I'm going all the way out to the West.
Yes, I was running a laboratory there in Spain, where we get to design and build that laboratory, and then the opportunity of being the director here at Hinsdale showed up, and we were in a stage in my career that it was the right step to go. My daughters were still young enough, so we could do the jump, and then went beyond the crossing the Atlantic. We went all the way to the other coast.
All right. Well, I'm glad. We're glad you did that. Hopefully, they have a Corvallis to Spain direct flight somewhere for you.
No, forget it.
I was just kidding on that one. All right, awesome. Well, I'll turn it over to Dan or Palma. You guys can go right ahead.
Yeah, I was really excited to stumble upon that video on Instagram, and we'll definitely have to include a link to it when we post this episode because people really have to see it. And for people that are just seeing your lab for the first time, can you explain to us what we're looking at?
Yes, there is a number of labs in the world. We've been in these industry. It's not really an industry. These space of science and engineering, which is physical model testing, meaning we are physically creating the waves and testing the structures in the lab. And there are different shapes and different options there where you can find around. But in particular, our lab is made of two large facilities, are actually the facilities that can produce the largest waves in the US, which is something that we still want to keep that way. And in this case, what we have to do is to reduce the scale of what we are testing. We reproduce the conditions of the oceans. Of course, we cannot make those 10-meter waves or tsunamis the size that you see are happening in nature. We reduce the scales, but we try to stay as big as possible so physics still is valid. And then what we do is we study how the waves propagate. We measure, we have different ways of measuring and different techniques on building what is gonna be in the ocean and how that responds to the action of those waves. So the conditions and the type of experiments that we do is changing every time. It goes from studies of sedimentation, studies of coastal structures and inundation, tsunamis, and you name it. What we tend to say is that we have an open box where we build things to represent what happens in nature, and then we everything that can go in the ocean or in the water, including in some occasions rivers and lakes. We probably, over 53 years of testing at Hinsdale, we probably have already tested.
So Pedro, how big, I mean, obviously you have to reduce it just for practicality purposes. How big is your laboratory space? It is by any chance, are we kind of glancing into it? Is that it behind you in the window?
What you see behind me is one of the buildings, is the building that hosts the large wave flume. That is about 400 feet long, and the width I don't really know, but maybe is something like 100 feet wide. And the flume itself is about the size, or a little bit longer than the size of football fields, so people can picture how it is. And the size of the waves we can generate in the flume is the largest wave is about the size of a person, 6 foot, about this is the maximum size, which represents in some places like lakes or sheltered areas, full-size waves that we are testing here. The other building that you don't see, which is in the other side, it hosts the directional wave basin. That is the facility that you see in the Instagram post and many other places. And that is about the size of an Olympic swimming pool. The size of the waves is about half of what we can do in the flume, but the difference is that we can generate waves with different directions coming from a range of directions that happens and represents more accurately what happens in the ocean.
So I want to get to the research, but I have to ask, how do you actually like set what kind of waves you want? Is it like a dial that you turn? Is it a computer program? Like, how does that work?
Well, it's a computer program. Okay. Nowadays, the technology to generate those waves have evolved, and the machines that produces those waves also have changed. And nowadays, we are able to produce very accurately those conditions. Depending on the experiments, we produce waves that are set to study what is the impact of the changes on those waves into the structures that we are studying. So those are more fundamental type of research. Other type of experiments say is like, we have measured this wave in this location, and we want you to reproduce those conditions as they are, but in a reduced scale. For example, the project that we are doing as we speak in the basin is like that. So we set those conditions based on a computer program, but the definition of those wave conditions are the ones that are coming from either the research or the specific conditions in the place we are reproducing those waves.
Huh. Very interesting. All right, we're going to take our first break here. We'll come back on the other side here on Tidal Flooding Talk.
Atlantic City Restaurant Week, reimagined. Join us this March for the month-long culinary celebration, showcasing the city's diverse and vibrant dining scene, offering a delicious opportunity for both locals and visitors to savor the best of Atlantic City's flavors. Taste Atlantic City's 48 blocks of endless flavor.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, and we would like to remind our viewers to build responsibly. Smart building choices can protect your home and your wallet. Elevating just 1 foot above the minimum required height can reduce flood damage and lower insurance costs. Be sure to raise mechanical systems like HVAC units and generators, and use flood-resistant materials whenever possible. Small, proactive decisions can make a big difference.
Awesome. We are back with Pedro here. So tell us what you guys found in this viral video experiment. I mean, he was studying hurricane surge and wave impacts on coastal structures. I'm assuming you were trying to study when these structures would fail. So just what did you find?
Well, I have to say that we are still crunching the data, I would say, and
research takes time. I understand. Yes.
And it's more than that. It's like we nowadays have the ability to collect so much data that it takes time really to produce something meaningful. In this particular experiment, we were interested in seeing the differences of testing something at a really large scale. In this case, the houses were 3 times smaller than a normal house. And we found what we were expecting to have a significant resilience of the house when we increase the height by 1 foot. And so that would go from the storm that or the flood levels that is typically exceeded with a return period of 100 years. That has some caveats on understanding exactly the meaning of that, but that means that the probability of exceedance is 1%. And then when we increase 1 foot the height of those houses, the return period of that storm was 500 years, which is significantly smaller. Is 0.2% probability of exceedance. No, so that increase on height by 1 foot only, which was an increase of 30% on the height of the house, reduce the damage all the way to the maximum flooding, and it was the expected first outcome. But we're going beyond on the knowing what we are, or just confirming what we thought was going to happen, but also we measure how the houses were destroyed, what was the first part of the house that was being damaged, and how the damage was progressing, and in which portion of the houses we found that was more damage than others. And that can inform the decision on where to reinforce the houses, what are the parts that are more susceptible for damaging, and so on. So things like whether the windows are affecting the damage, or the doors, or the connection points. And once the structure fails, how it fails, what is it that is happening to the rest of the house, and the fields of debris that is created that becomes a hazard for other houses that are down the street. No.
Now, Pedro, do you create these, like the structures you use as well? So you want everything to be as realistic and to scale as possible. So, I mean, are you recreating, typical, homes to scale along the shore, materials, and, how close to reality are the experiments coming? And this is pretty cool that you're building a coastal community in your lab. I think that's really, really cool, and can't wait to see the video.
Yes, one aspect that typically has been done over the years when you reduce the scale of the house, the geometry of the house is smaller, and the waves are also smaller. We have a pretty good understanding on how to reproduce the effect of those waves at that reduced scale. But the response of the house, which is how the materials are responding, how is damaged, and where the breaks, where is it starting to break, and so on. That is something that is a challenge because material doesn't scale the same way as the water. So what we were spending time was to reproduce also not only the construction and the material, but also how the resistance of the house was also scaled properly, and then the damage was also reproduced accordingly.
Now, who is on your team with this experiment? Like, I'm sure there's quite a few of you collaborating, whether it's engineers, structural engineers. How do you work together to produce this experiment?
Yes, I have to say that my part is fundamentally the component related to the experiments in the lab and the instrumentation, but the conceptualization and the design of the houses, and as you said, the structural engineering behind it the credit goes to two professors here at Oregon State. One is Dan Cox. He's a professor of coastal engineering in Oregon State, and working fundamentally in the resilience of buildings by the coast. And another one is a professor, Andre Barbosa. He is working on the structural component, understanding those specific components on how to measure how the structure is behaving and so on. And behind there is a number of different collaborators from other universities, nation and internationally. During the experiments that we did, we had people coming from Germany, Japan, Korea, and Spain as well. So there was a larger, I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but we have a really large cohort of people attending and contributing to the project. This type of project, because of the impact you can imagine, is surrounded by grad students, undergrad students, professors, and also technicians from the lab. Probably at the end, maybe 25 or 30 people were involved in the whole project.
And when people see waves crashing into model homes, what is the main lesson you want them to get out of it?
Well, the laboratory has a very nice component in people, because people can relate to what's happening and see what it has a mirror image of what you can see at the coast. So the first thing that if people see is, yes, of course, the power of the ocean and the relevance of a number of things, but the other thing is what they learn is you get a better insight of the processes. So you get to see things really close. Sometimes when it was by chance, it happened that after our experiments, there was these damage on a series of houses in North Carolina, in Rodante and so on. It was the images that we saw there were identical to what we saw during the experiments, and the response of the houses were basically the same. So that impact is for us what we try to convey to not only the students and professors from the scientific perspective, but also for the general public and decision makers. It's like we have the ability to understand the process, and we don't have to wait for the storms to come and produce damage in our communities. We can do it and understand it beforehand. And that is one of the takeaways that we want to have, the impact we want to have in the public and students.
You're kind of getting into what I wanted to ask you was, beyond academia, I have to imagine there's emergency managers or state, police or officials that are interested in this. What have your conversations been like for them? And is this something that you provide as a public good, or is this something that, you kind of make money off of?
No, the intention here is not to make money out of it. Our intention is to provide the tools to the emergency managers and the decision makers, even the building code of the industry and constructors and insurance companies, to have the best way of the best tools, so the houses have a better way of designing and responding, and the general public as well. So where is the moment that we decided to change the conditions of our houses, or retrofit them, or even evacuate those? So we've been in contact with these different aspects of the chain on how the houses are built, and the emergency that when that happens is from long time, since we've been involved in also the effect of tsunamis and so on. People come to us to see if they can learn and what they can learn from our experience instead of waiting for the damage or the event to happen.
Awesome. All right, we're going to take our final break here. We'll come back on the other side with Pedro Lomonaco.
Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Welcome back to this week's Tidal Flooding Talk. Final segment here with Dan, Joe, Palma, and we're talking waves with Pedro Lomonaco. I think it's so cool, though, that we're talking off camera just now. Usually you have to wait for a natural disaster to see, how buildings are going to stand up to waves. I mean, you're being proactive and kind of modeling this and, kind of teaching. And I think it's really cool what you thought about like architects and building codes, and Palma's probably getting chills too. Like, we can prepare ahead of storms with the research that you are doing. My question for you, Pedro, is, where does your research go from here? Like, what else do you want to explore that you haven't done yet?
Good news is that from our perspective, that there is always things to study and to understand in the different processes. What we study and we test in the lab is not only buildings at the coast and how they are damaged. We tested other things. So it is there is a number of still chapters that we want to address. One of the chapters that we are starting barely is what you saw in those images of how the structures are responding, and we talk about it, and that's a very challenging aspect. But there is a number of elements that we haven't tested completely, like, for example, the foundations, how the foundation is changing because of erosion and the sand is moving. We didn't address that portion of the damage on the structures, and it was something that was significantly affecting the houses in Rodante, for example, in the last months. So we are also addressing aspects of we talk about the debris field that is created by the houses. When a house is being damaged and is separated from its foundation, it creates a field that is affecting and damaging other houses nearby. And that happens also during tsunami events. There is these debris is becoming a very relevant hazard to the stability of other structures, but also for people. So if the water is clean and you have a tsunami, you have more chances of surviving than if you have a tsunami with cars and buildings and things floating around, or not even floating, and people. So that is an aspect that we are studying and trying to understand better. Predicting debris fields is very complex, and that is one of those components, and that we are exploring. And what we expect to keep on moving is that, besides something that we are learning from nature, how nature has been protecting itself over the years to these events. So nature has hundreds, tens of thousands of years to create a system that is resilient and naturally protective. And we are now learning from that. How can we use the lessons from nature to apply it in engineering and protect communities, which is more sustainable than basically concrete the whole world and the ocean and the coastline. So is something that we are expecting to work more in the future, is how to work with nature on protecting the coastline.
Now, you've been studying waves for a long time. So is there anything in your research with this particular experiment, that really surprised you?
Yes, we really have to go bigger with the waves than we anticipated first. That was a surprise. We realized that the system was significantly stronger. These houses were significantly stronger, not significant, but they were just stronger in comparison to what we anticipate. That was one surprise. Another surprise was where the house and how the house was tried. It was basically deforming and creating some walls were flying away, but still the house remained in place. And for example, the house that is elevated to the 100-year return period event, we just generated the largest wave we could, and we were unable to completely destroy it. It was total, of course, but we were not able to dislodge the second floor and create the field of debris. So we found that once the house changes its shape and the walls are falling, we call that breakaway walls. So when the walls are not withstanding the forces of the waves, then the waves just pass through and the forces are diminished significantly. So the house can remain in place for longer time. And that is something that you actually see in nature, as long as the foundation survives. That is one of the elements. So those surprises, and another surprise I have to say is the number of views that we had in our video in Instagram. It was like, okay, my daughter was surprised that I was more influencer than her in a given moment.
Yeah, you had 1.3, I'm looking now, 1.3 million likes on that post on August 8th on Instagram, and like 350,000 likes on Facebook, and so many comments, including us. And you got a few interviews out of it as well. So we'll look for more of those videos. You got to post more of those videos. You got whoever's in charge of the social. We'll look forward to it. All right, so we're going to wrap up here the same way we do every week with the one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. Dan, we'll start off with you.
Oh, I'm just talking about with my family about our first ever get out of winter vacation. I don't like to miss winter storms, but we're hitting up Punta Cana in the not so distant future. So I'm constantly monitoring the weather for their weather, which, is not in hurricane season when we normally go. So I think we're okay on that end, but hopefully getting out to Punta Cana, hoping that Mother Nature behaves herself. So that's what the skeletons are talking about.
How much snow, like what's your threshold of you're going to regret going to Punta Cana level of snow?
I'd say 6 or more.
6 or more? Oh, all right. Oh, that's okay. We'll see what happens. Happens. Papa?
That sounds pretty nice. I've never been there, but yeah, I usually we like to travel somewhere warm for the winter, but we just haven't been doing that with moving and everything like that. But I think the only thing that I've been talking about is feeling better and not being sick anymore. But yeah.
Very important. Yes, we got to stay healthy for tidal flooding talk. All right, so I did have one, and I told you guys I'd say it before the show, but just listening to Pedro, one thought that isn't escaping my mind, but I didn't want to ask it during the serious discussion is, you guys ever go in this pool? You guys ever hang out, bring the surfboard, boogie board, wave? Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of paperwork that we have to deal with EHS and so on, but we have done studies on surfability and effects of wake swimming in these facilities. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, is that we have a space, we have the water, we can produce the waves. So it's just a matter of what we decide to do with those waves. And we have studied, and in the past, more people were swimming. Nowadays, we are more careful on what we do on the surfability of those waves in the facility. Yeah.
Okay. But you're not occupying those houses, right?
Yeah. Water is too cold, I have to say. It's not like in Punta Cana. No, yeah. we are not gonna get that water.
All right, Pedro. We'll leave it off with you with the final word. What's one thing you can't stop thinking about or talking about?
One thing that I can't stop thinking or that needs to be part of the conversation is this awareness of the communities on what is these processes of tidal floods and so on. It is something that the more people understand better how the ocean behaves, people will start making the right decisions on where to locate your houses, how to protect from flooding and so on. There is a compromise that we have to start making is sometimes it's better to stay away from that flooding areas than build your house just overlooking the ocean, which is normally nice, except when the storm comes.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for this week's episode. Pedro, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. You can follow Oregon State Engineering. It's just at Oregon State Engineering on social media. On Instagram, they have a really cool page. You can check out the video that spurred this conversation there. It's from August 8th. But Pedro, thanks so much for the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you
Post
much.
more videos.
Yes, we will. Thank you. And you're welcome to come here anytime.